Welcome back to the Gun Mag podcast. I don't do my hands. You ever watch the Jocko podcast? He's like, Ramadi. 2009. Elements of Task Force Bruiser moved into the city. They got
Dude,
I'm working
listening to his book.
Gets me jacked, dude.
Dude, it got me pumped.
I wake up at 1 a.m. now.
I don't, but
That was a joke.
I could understand why you would.
Yeah. Corey knew I was full of it, dude.
Yeah. I wake up 8 a.m. tired as fuck.
This sounds more realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds more realistic.
I stayed up too late playing video games.
What are you playing?
Hell Let Loose.
Dude, you're on the Hell Let Loose grind?
Insurgency.
Okay.
Insurgency Sandstorm.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of Tarkov, but I'm not a fan.
I respect the game. I respect the crowd. I just personally can't get into Tarkov.
It's too much. If I have an inventory system where I got slots and stuff, that's just a little bit.
It's a lot.
It's a little bit too much.
I respect that they've got the detail down.
Sure.
For the ammo.
Oh yeah. I mean, you load the wrong ammo in there, you cause malfunction or whatever. That's great for something.
That's great stuff, man. It's good stuff. It's good for gun stuff. It's good for gun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, do they have the real names in that too? Right.
I think
the real names of the guns.
With them being in Russia, they're like, yeah, we'll just use it. Because I think the usual thing with video games is a copyright issue.
That's the thing that I didn't like about Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Is because you've got this massive young audience that could be learning a lot about guns.
Oh my gosh, is this the M13? And you're
Yeah.
nah, dude, it's a SIG Spear. Or it's a SIG
Exactly.
MCX. Yeah.
Yep. So that's my biggest gripe with it ultimately. Or the fact that you can carry around 1,200 rounds of ammunition, 8 plates, and 6 RPGs.
Yeah, the 8 plate thing's a little weird.
And just
slide around corners. I'm like, no, dude, you'd be so tired. You'd be so tired.
You can't even be able to do that once without busting your ass.
I know. Yeah, you're telling me you got a freaking RPG on your back with a belt fed and you're just sliding around corners with 8 plates on. Yeah, no, you're
good luck.
Yeah, that's some Olympic, NFL level athleticism. Those guys wouldn't even have it, dude.
No. Maybe if you're a methed up German or something like that in World War II.
I can see
but
that.
they're a lot lighter weight.
That's true.
They just didn't have as much
Dude,
shit.
we're pretty big, historically speaking. I got on this tangent of looking up the ancient sizes of people. Ancient Romans, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were 5'5" on average.
I was going to say 5'6".
And they thought Vikings were huge back in the day too, but they're actually 5'7" or something. You know what I mean?
Well, the Nords...
I think they were 5'9".
Yeah, exactly. The Nords were pretty tall, but not by today's standards.
No, so you think they're 7 feet behemoths, but they're not, dude.
Every now and then you get an anomaly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You get Samson or whatever. You get a monster out there.
You get Goliath out there, yeah.
And back in the day, he's in charge for obvious reasons.
Absolutely. Who's going to tell the guy? You have to literally kill the dude when he's sleeping.
Yeah.
It's
which is actually a pretty interesting concept. Alexander the Great was 13 whenever he had traveled across and killed all these people and conquered all these lands.
Yeah.
How do you get thousands and thousands of full-grown ass men to be yeah, dude, you're in charge?
That's a good question, man. I think
psychologically.
Him inheriting, he's the rich kid that inherits the empire. So I think it's one, he's already got this institutionalized education.
Sure.
2, everyone swore loyalty to his father. I believe, King Philip. So he gets assassinated. Everyone already swore loyalty. They're okay, cool. He's the firstborn son. This is how things go.
Yep.
It's how they expect it. But yeah, it's what would this stop them from being dude, nah, I'm the strong man now.
But Gladiator.
Yeah.
You think about that, he was going to pass it on to Maximus, and then the pissed off other guy's nah. Yeah, pretty much mine.
Commodus is no, I want to be emperor. And Marcus Aurelius is
we must pass it on.
Yeah.
Commodus is not a
You're speaking my language right now. This is I besides the gun channel stuff, I go off on long, ancient, historical tangents and binges. Literally, I think last night I stayed up too late playing Rome 2 Total War.
Do you know how many hours I have in that game?
How many hours?
Probably 2,000.
Oh my God. So we know the language. And is it every time you fire it up, you're you know what, I'm going to be a faction, have a hard game. Every time it's I'm just going to play Rome.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I end up going back to anyways, because they have the best units. And where they start out at, depending on how you want to take it, you can go after Carthage first. Yeah. One time I made friends with Carthage.
I rewrote
Carthage? Yeah, I rewrote history, dude.
Carthage has to burn, dude. It must be destroyed.
Just holding them at bay. We do a little trade. We'll do a non-aggressive pact. And I'll go over there and conquer everything on the right side.
Yeah.
I go all the way to Bacatria or whatever it is on the far right of that map, and then swing back over once my navy's all built up. And just,
you take them on.
Yeah,
dude.
Just ram them.
That's pretty smart. I
Doesn't
usually
work every time.
Yeah, I like to go for them off the get-go. No navy. I just swing. I'll like blitz the city itself and just land on the beach right by Carthage and take out their capital.
Hell yeah.
Cut that Africa in half, dude. This is probably terrible for the podcast, but or you just go and you take on like the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, essentially, conquer Spain, and then from that point you have the power and resources essentially to start dominating them.
Correct.
But their navy is so good.
It is very good, but it's a pretty good strategy to go ahead and take out your number one competition right out of the gate.
Yeah, because pretty much,
Who's next? Egypt?
I was playing on hard mode and I was getting worked, dude. Like it was very hard mode. I've been getting absolutely worked, and now I wanted to be like, okay, I want to feel good about myself, so I put it on easy. And it's like I'm looking at it, and it's like 200 some BC still, and I have like veteran legionaries and praetorians. Like I'm hundreds of years advanced, and all the competition of every other nation state can't touch me whatsoever. It's like they could mass like 3 armies, and my one legion is just gonna be like I'm just gonna like essentially game it and just back my army into the corner and just let them get slaughtered. So
yeah, I mean play to your strengths, and whenever you're overpowering everybody, make it a challenge.
Exactly, dude.
Because at the same time, it's like if you don't, all they do every turn is, hey, you want to be like defensive allies? That's so true. Hey, you want to be like defensive allies?
No,
like, hey, you want to pay me like $3,000 and like I won't attack you? Like you can't do shit to me.
Please attack me.
Yeah,
please attack me. This game is getting stale.
The only thing I don't like is the Civil War factor. I mean, I like that it's in the game, but that's what I do want to avoid.
I agree. It's like you essentially are on a blitz to get to Imperium or get to an empire, so you can avoid the Civil War side of it.
It's a fantastic game.
It's so good.
Statecraft.
Dude.
And then you got your family lineage.
Yeah.
You got to like make your dudes reproduce, get married, and have the next of kin.
Yeah.
Right? And get your heir out there or adopt.
That's a good point. Or stop other adopt. Anyway, this has become the Total War 2 podcast. And I'm okay with it.
Yeah, a small segment of it. I mean, to introduce you, administrative results. Is that true?
This is true. This is, am I supposed to do like an intro right now?
No. You don't have to do that.
Oh, okay. All right.
You don't have to do that.
All right.
No, I reached out to you on social media.
Yeah.
Because I like your stuff.
Thank you.
Like the videos, like the vibe.
Yeah.
And some of that vibe is what I think was missing in a lot of the content. Grant Thumb does a really good job at that.
Love that guy.
If you stare into the sun for a really long time and then like look around, you'll get that T-Rex arms look where everything's green and blue around you. It's like you could call that a vibe too.
Right.
That's some people's, some people like specific people. They don't have to like everybody in the gun industry. People call it a gun community. You can, but I wouldn't call it that. It's more of a conglomeration of individuals that really like guns and the history of guns and what we do with them.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the deeper message there. It's less about the tool itself. Some people, the nerds, the guys who need every random detail, really like the gun stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, I think, goes back to the Rome style stuff of, we were from conquerors. We were from people that went out, did stuff, faced the dragon, brought the gold back, and spread the wealth, right? We became the knights of the story, so to speak. And you're out there in the desert shooting a gun, vibing, and all these people are tuned into the exact same frequency, and they're like, yeah, give me some more of that. So there's a few things that rose just above the vibe as well. You and Mojo stand out in that sense because you were in law enforcement at one point, and the mandatory came across, and you basically said, I have a principle that I am not going to surpass. Yeah. And I think that takes a lot of cojones, to be able to do that, to be able to take a perfectly viable career choice and then say, I just can't do it, and I'm going to do the more risky
I'm just going to make internet gun videos. It was elite, man. Everyone I talked to in my personal life, they're like, you're going to quit your well-paying job. Keep in mind, I'm a dummy. So I I don't have a college bone in me. I tried it, can't do it. Maybe I'll go back one day, but I couldn't do that. I was a dummy in high school, and then for me to essentially land a really good career where I was like decent at, I was still dumb, but I was like decent at doing cop stuff, like the hecticness, the high risk situations, and then like the stress of it. They didn't really bother me too much. Of course, no one likes paperwork and the legal stuff. That's just, well, at least I didn't. That's the nerd stuff, but I really enjoyed it. So then when the jab came along, and they're like, "Hey, you gotta get this jab, or else you're fired." And so this is how it kind of went too. And keep in mind, I worked for a tribal police department, so they can get away with this. So nowhere else in the state, but I was still state certified. So they essentially said, "Hey, per date of this email, you have 30 days to get vaccinated, or else you're fired." And I was like, "Yo, that's messed up." Because even if you wanted to quit, like your principals, that still takes a long time to get hired on by another department. Mm-hmm. So essentially, I was kind of like, I got it, and I was like, man, I don't want to be here anymore. So I essentially put my 2 weeks in, and then I got some flack for not wearing a mask on a call. And they're like, "Hey, you're not wearing a mask." And to be fair, it's kind of like a rebellious little thing, but I was like, you know what, I'm out today. And they're like, "Okay, cool, like get your stuff, clear out your locker," kind of thing. And I was free, and I was it. And I was like, all right, time to do YouTube full time. So It worked out. I think the channel was at like 30 or 40,000 subs when I quit, and I was like, all right, we're gonna roll the dice.
Man. Okay, so that's not too bad. It's not like you were just jumping shit.
Right, but like, if you ask like bigger YouTubers, they'd be like, "Oh, dude, that's like crazy." But it's like if you were just starting out, you'd be like, "That's a huge number." So it was like a weird spot, because it's like at a spot where it's not enough to like technically provide for the family, but it's still like a good like risk taking spot.
Sure, yeah. I think that fire underneath you to like, hey, this could be something. It's not as much as I want yet, but it's also not nothing. That's enough to drive you to like really dive in and dedicate yourself to it.
Thankfully, I didn't have any kids. I don't have any kids yet, so it wasn't like, oh, I got to feed young mouths. Mm-hmm. So my wife's working too, so it's kind of like, this is kind of like the perfect time to do it.
Hell yeah.
So I was like, let's just roll the dice. And it worked out. Now I'm sitting on my kitchen table, and we're talking. We got an MP7. We're talking about Rome Total War for like the first 30 minutes of this podcast. So it's, sometimes you got to roll the dice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I got here either. I'm not anybody's son who got a nice position just because I happen to be the progeny of the owner or anything like that. But I somehow weaseled my way into marketing and doing gun stuff. So the other job offer I had was from Sally Beauty. So I was really banking on getting this job, dude. Because
You're telling me you came and work with a bunch of like beautiful women, and you chose a bunch of gun
correct,
nerds?
Yeah. I was engaged at the time.
Gotcha. I did it carry on, or is this a new one?
Yeah, no, married.
Okay.
I'm married.
He was engaged at the time. Okay.
And now married.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. I don't know if you were like, I was engaged at the time, found a new broad, married that. Okay, so same girl. Gotcha.
I don't have the energy to do more than one, and like I don't understand guys that do. It's already enough. Oh yeah, it's plenty.
The single fellas that are like, oh, I'm talking to this many women. I'm like, dude, that's a lot. That's a lot of them.
Yeah, on an app, cool, dog.
Yeah, that's a lot of them. Like, granted, they're also those women are also talking to like 3 times as many women that 100%. You're talking to. So dude version of them, if that makes sense. So
how long were you a cop?
Just 2 years.
Okay, so not crazy long, but enough to get the experience.
Right. So the academy was 6 months, and then actually just 2 years as an actual sworn peace officer.
And what drew you to it? Like, what made you want to be a cop?
It was I was always someone that felt called to a service capacity. Like I knew I had to do it, either if it was going to be military or law enforcement. And ironically, I was of course looking at military first. But I was getting more doors shut in my face when it came to the military stuff. Like I tried out, like my brothers, they were both Army officers, and they said, hey man, don't enlist in the Army unless you want to hate your life. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll take your advice. So I started going to college for it, and come to find out, I am not good at college. Like I cannot do college to save my life. Like the academia of it. And right. I was doing essentially the ROTC program down at a local college, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really fun. I liked the guys we were all like common people cut from the same cloth, but it just didn't work out for the grade wise, so I had to bounce out of that because it was getting to a point where I was gonna have to start paying out of pocket for college, and I was like, dude, I'm poor. I can't do that. So then I was looking at enlisting in the Air Force because I thought, okay, at least life would be better if I enlisted in the Air Force. I can go knock that out and then maybe do like a cool guy job of some capacity. Because I knew of like TAC-Ps and PJ. I knew of that stuff, right? And I was like, that sounds really cool. Yeah. And I was getting the door shut in there. And at the same time, I had applied for local PD. And the PD was paying like exuberantly more money than a like enlisted man for an Air Force, right? And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I can make buku bucks. I can get paid. They're like, hey, 2 years, you can be a SWAT guy. And I was like, dude, easy. So literally the process, I got told I was too fat by the Air Force. So they're like height and weight stuff and to lose weight. Now, keep in mind, I'm like 6 foot something. Like, well, 6 foot, but like 6'1", right? That's what I told my wife. I'm like 6'1". Good take, right? And at the time, I'm like probably 210, but I'm working out like twice a day. I'm like lean, and I felt great. And so I was getting told I was too fat, and I was like, oh, dude, what's going on? And so fast forward, then I essentially just get picked up by the PD, and I was like, all right, I'll just do that. I'll ride that train out. And it just worked out great. Like, very easy hiring process, one and done. I just applied to one department, got hired by that department. And it was like, okay, cool. And I'm making great money for like a 20-something. Like, I was 22 when I got hired. Like, they gave a 22-year-old a badge and a gun. They're like, all right, go do cop stuff. And I was like, looking back now, like, I'm like 26, so still a young guy. But I was like, dude, that's like crazy. You're just giving 22-year-olds a badge and a gun. But that's essentially it, man.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Whenever you first posted something, I think it was like an Ask Me Anything on your Instagram, like, how old are you? And you said 26. That was one of the first interactions that we had, because I laughed. I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
And you were like, what are you talking about? Like, I actually am 26. And in my head, I'm like, God, I'm such a piece of shit. Like, I haven't done anything. No. Like, all these things, I got it all set up on my mind. Yeah, I'm going to do this and this and this. And 3,000 hours later on Rome 2.
At some point, you do have to log off of Rome. At some point, you gotta go to the gym. You gotta do whatever you're working on. But damn, is Rome like the best time suck ever, dude?
It absolutely is.
Oh my god.
But I think that speaks to a lot of what's going on in our society today. Because even whenever I would read the comments on some of your posts, guys would be like, "Dude, I'm like 29, and I just feel like a piece of shit, like seeing this guy being successful, doing his thing." What advice would you give those guys?
You got to take risks. It's like, it feels weird if you ask me that, like, essentially give advice, because it feels weird. Because to me, it's like I don't feel successful, but at the same time, I'm sitting here with an MP7. We're like on a podcast, and it's like 1:24 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. It's like your unemployed friends on a Wednesday. Right?
Yeah, dude.
Right, but it's I guess you essentially got to take risks, take care of yourself. Like, it really is super simple. Things I would say is, like, hit the gym every day, like, work out, lift weights. Don't watch porn. I know, like, that's like a controversial one for a lot of people. I'm like, dude, it's not good for your brain. It's really not good for your brain. And I get it. Like, this is the golden era to watch people have sex on the internet, but it's like, it is not good for your brain. Like,
yeah, I wouldn't really call it controversial. I think anybody who has like an issue with that is probably the one with the problem, with the one who watches it on radio.
I trust me, I see the appeal. You have any flavor of your desire, but it's
times
like
1,000.
Times 1,000, right? And
what is it,
like,
Rule 42 or something like that on Reddit? Which it's probably not 42 because I'm jacked in the brain, but it's rule something or other.
Yeah.
Where if it exists, there's a porn for it.
Oh man. Yeah. So it's like, essentially you have any of your flavor of degeneracy, and it's just like messing with your neural synapses and your dopamine. It's just not good for you. So quit that, and then probably reduce your video game intake until you feel like you've accomplished something. It's pretty simple stuff. Then of course you got to take risks. Like, that's calculated risks, I guess. But
sure. Well, something that I noticed too, my wife's a teacher, and she's asked her third graders before, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And obviously this has changed a lot over the years, but she's only been teaching for a few years, and one of these last few years she asked that question, and 80% of them wanted to be a YouTuber.
That tracks. That's nuts, dude.
Right? So, I mean, we can't have 80% of people be YouTubers.
No.
So there's a lot of people that want to sit around at 1 o'clock with an MP7 on the desk, and while everybody else is out working, but it's just not possible.
Yeah, it's a nuts concept. I can see the appeal. It's a good life, man. Once you get to a certain point, it's a really good life. Especially if it's tough though, because you do have to. At least like earn it, in my opinion. Like you do have to earn it. It's not just going to show up on your lap.
Sure.
Like you can, like women have the luxury, if they're hot, they can, I guess, go do OnlyFans, but don't watch it. But you can go do OnlyFans if you're a hot woman, just based off their body. But like for dudes, like for us, it's kind of like, hey man, you got to figure out your niche. You have to be like funny. You have to like know how to talk to a camera and treat the camera like it's the audience. You essentially, and it's like, yeah, we're sitting here at 1 in the afternoon, but it's like, I was working on another video before you showed up, getting prep work done for this video we're about to go shoot. It's a nonstop. It's like, I don't work a normal 9 to 5. I'm my own boss, and the existential crisis of, am I doing enough to prepare for the future, to like essentially lay the foundation for success for my family so that my kids and their kids' kids can have a good life, right? And it's like, am I able to do this off YouTube alone? I have to look at other sources of income, because I know this is 9,000% of shelf life. Like I can't be like 50 and run around shooting MP7s. Ideally, I mean, that's what I want to do. I
completely disagree, and that's what I was going to bring up.
Right.
Because the shelf life of a woman on OnlyFans is a limit. You're not going to see an 80-year-old grandma on that thing. And if you do, there's maybe 4 of them.
True.
Okay, it's an extremely limited amount.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I saw a video on Instagram, and it inspired me. Changed my life completely. It was Jerry Mitchellek.
That's true.
He was sitting there, and he's talking about bullet trace on a 22. He's going to take this little 22 Magnum pistol out to 1,000 yards. He's got this big old scope on it. It's all mounted, and he...
Yeah.
Bing! Oh, I got it. Let me try one more time. And he doesn't pull the trigger, and bing! And it backs up, and his wife's back there smacking on the metal. Oh, baby, now we got to do the whole thing over. And I'm like, I know what I want to be when I grow up. Yeah. That's exactly what I want to do.
You got me there. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic. I'm thinking worst case.
Well, you're pretty humble in general, and I've seen that a lot. I listened to all the podcasts that you've been on in preparation for this, because I don't want to ask a bunch of like the same type of when's the mask coming off, bud?
Yeah.
But
right now.
Yeah. But thumbnail. But that is something that I think that because you're very humble about, you're not giving yourself the full credit. You went to Finland to shoot guns with a very hand-selected group of people. You're a part of the Leviathan tribe, which is another hand-selected group of people.
Controversial shills. Yeah.
Really?
No, we can dive into that later, but yeah.
I haven't heard any of that.
I'll give you the backstory, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like everybody on that list.
Right. No, they're great people. They're great people.
And ultimately, like, you can pave the way to your destruction or your success, depending on how you want to handle fame, I guess, if you want to call it that, but more so just the direction of the impact of what you want to do. Because, you're making gun videos on the internet or whatever, but there's more to it than that. And the people, the lives that you're actually touching and affecting is a net positive. You're not getting these guys to go out there and commit crimes. Like, you're going in there and saying, like, hey, this is how you do it legally. This is the stuff I've got. This is what's cool. And if it is illegal, when all of a sudden we can't run plate carriers anymore, well, we're going to make them common use. We're going to start wearing them all the time. We're going to run suppressors. We're going to do everything we can to make gun culture American culture again. Because it used to be, and then we got really scared of them, and the mass media took over, and everything changed.
Yeah.
You can't order guns from catalogs anymore and ship them to your high school. Okay?
Yeah.
Those big red flags now.
Apparently you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Ask me how I know.
Yeah. That's a good point, man. That's a good point.
But I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that you're going out there doing stuff and you're risking it. And that alone is enough to show people that, like, maybe I don't have to be a lazy ass all the time. Maybe there is something out there for me, because if it works for other people, then why wouldn't it work for me? Now, everybody can't be a YouTuber. Sorry, guys. Not everybody can be. But if you're really good at something,
give it a shot. Yeah.
You should absolutely try it, because the barrier to entry is basically zero.
Yeah.
If you got a phone, you can record yourself doing anything. You have no idea where that'll end up. So, having said that, what's the long-term goal for your channel, for what you want to kind of do? Because Grant Thumb started off doing gun reviews, and now he's sort of let it out that his real goal is to do some bushcraft stuff, some seer stuff. And at the time, there just wasn't a big audience for it, but now he's got an audience, and the audience pretty much likes whatever he likes. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be around you. I want to talk about what you know. So Do you have a goal for something like that or a forecast for it?
Yeah, essentially it would be to amplify the culture that we have with gun stuff, at least the culture that I like to see. And a lot of that, my next phase, it would be, yeah, I want to get a company going of some kind. I think that's a good idea because it helps support everything else you want to do. Sure. And that company can start to take over. You want to rely on YouTube or big tech censorship as much. That's like something I want to do. I would have to find a product I want to, like, I feel comfy putting my name on to some capacity. But my vision, my dream would be acquiring both a shooting range and some sort of airsoft complex. I've got a real big love for airsoft now. It's nonstop growing, man. And when I was coming up in the gun culture, it was like very frowned upon by the hardcore gun guys. But then again, these hardcore gun guys, it's like, hey, they couldn't bench press 225 or they couldn't run a mile. So it was like, okay, first off, check yourself. Oops, sorry. First off, you gotta check yourself because you're about to get wrecked by some 12-year-olds with some airsoft guns. And it's essentially how I view airsoft now is kind of like a feeder to gun culture. And they kind of work in symbiosis too once you reach a certain point, because a lot of the gun guys I know now are also been going to airsoft events. All the airsoft guys I know now, also gun guys. So it's like the two are intertwined. And I think it's, because I know growing up, I started off with video games, but I'm not gonna be a game developer. So how can I help that culture? Sure. By providing the physical space. And then with the shooting range, I can help provide the physical space. I don't want to do the instructing, because
sure, yeah.
It's like, one, I want to be on my own time. I don't think I need to instruct. I don't know if I have enough to bring to the table to even instruct in the first place. So I'd provide that space for actual certified bona fide people to help give real life skills to those that need them, right? So, civilians, law enforcement, military, stuff like that. And that's kind of that's like the dream. That's like the big vision. Essentially help with a feeder of like airsoft field, focused on realism and, tactical and really cool setting, essentially providing an immersive environment. And then a real life shooting range. One, so I can have my own physical space for filming. I think that'd be really cool. Essentially be like a movie set to help keep the culture going, right? So that's essentially like my big dream, big vision. That's like the what I would write down on the board and try and pursue. So that's essentially it.
I think that's an awesome goal. Like when I saw the picture of Grantham's new range, I'm like, man, the universe is a badass place. Yeah. This guy makes internet YouTube videos and now he owns this property. Yeah. Like, man, I got to turn the game off, right? Yeah. And that's ultimately the conclusion that I had to come to. And that I think a lot of other people, it might not be games, that might not be the vice for some people, but it might be porn, it might be something else. It's the quick dopamine hits that end up making any sort of long-term net positive just not worth it. Yeah. Because if you have delayed gratification or immediate gratification, typically human beings are going to go with the path of least resistance. Right. So you see that a lot.
Right. We live in a very instant dopamine hit society now. I mean, you think about it, just like pulling up Instagram Reels. I won't get TikTok. I can't do TikTok. But essentially it's the same format. You're just dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. It's like you have to really, I think to succeed, like tasting a little bit of success now, it's going to involve suffering. It's going to involve like the uncomfort. And I think just as men, and I can't speak to being a woman because this isn't a politically correct thing. I just don't know like what it's like to be a woman. But I know as a man, it's like you pretty much got to suffer. And once you suffer, you feel a lot better. Like if I don't go to the gym in a day, I feel like a piece of shit. And I just don't feel good. I don't feel like in the mood to do anything. I gotta work out to some capacity. Yep. Right. It's just like a simple stuff. You gotta drink water. It's like, I know it sounds dumb, but it's like for me, the simple details compound and they add up. So it's like when you're trying to do this like video editing, it's like taking the time to research, okay, what's your L cut? What's your J cut? What look do you want to go for? How are you going to edit this? What other software you can use to amplify your edits? It's like you have to take the footwork, the time, the suffering. When you want to be playing Rome, Total War, but now you got to be like doing your homework essentially on the stuff you care about. It's like essentially you just got to kind of do the man thing, grow up and grit your teeth and suffer.
Yep, and I think your personal character has a lot to do with that too. Because when nobody's there, when you don't actually have a boss that's going to tell you, hey, admin, you didn't meet the deadline. Yeah. Then like, shit, man, I can just kind of move that deadline. You know, if I don't do anything this week, things will be okay. Yeah. But 2 weeks, 3 weeks, eventually it starts to fade off, and then I think a lot of that has to do with the momentum you build based on those little habits. Because the one day you don't go to the gym, the next day you're like, I don't know if I want to go.
I don't feel.
The more I don't go, the more I don't want to go. Right. And even when I don't want to go, when I go, I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
And that's what I got to tell myself every time. If I'm ever like, I don't really feel like it.
Yeah. You just got to show up, dude. You show up. You could have a bad day at the gym. Hey, man, you still went to the gym.
Exactly.
You made a bad YouTube video. It's like, hey, it sucks. It may not be doing how you want it to, but it's a learning lesson. Get better.
Well, that's an issue I have personally myself. I don't like a lot of the stuff I do anyway. And that's just a self-deprecating type of thing, self-sabotage. Oh, I could have done this better, which, you want to have a little bit of that to build off of. But after the fact, it's like, man, this could have been perfect if I had this.
Yeah.
And it's just too late. Once it's posted, it's out there. So there's no going back and redoing a video or changing an edit. So everything's got to be right up front, which means you have to have done that homework up front and beforehand.
You gotta have that attention to detail. The devil is in the details.
The devil is in the details, and that's another thing that I wanted to bring up to you is all the kit that you use, because it's extremely detailed, and not because I'm saying that, because that's what I've seen a bunch of other people say. I don't know the details well enough to say like, oh, that's right on par. This is exactly what he needed to be wearing.
We're about to go down a rabbit hole, my man. What is your question about the kit per se? I gotta have like a general like.
Well, where did you start on your journey to get all that education?
You know what's funny is I think started out being a young guy getting into airsoft, and that got me that started to get my tactical gear like itch, and so you start going to this research. Hey, what are chest riders? What are plate carriers? What are all this? What are the pouches used in conjunction? And then you see like the looks of like the guys that are using it overseas, and you're like, okay, well, what kit are they using? So then you hop into forums, and you're like asking guys, and guys are identifying kit and going down the line. I remember, this is an example, but this is of course, I'll fast forward to when I am a gun guy now. And seeing Christian Craighead back in 2019 in January when he stopped the Nairobi terrorist attacks, and I was like, what drip does this man have? What a guy. And it's essentially inspired this look, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, I want to make videos, but I didn't want to show my face at the time. So, but essentially I went down and had to do the research, and eventually, the blogs came out about like what kit he was using. But it's like, you just do your research essentially. And keep in mind, I still get a lot of stuff wrong. I'm definitely not perfect. And there are guys that are just wizards when it comes to tactical gear out there that know all this stuff. So it's like it's like that bell curve. When you start learning about it, you're like, oh, I know nothing. That's what it feels like. I still feel like I know absolutely nothing because there's just so much tactical gear. There's so much that goes into it, and it's like you talk to guys that make it, and it's like, okay, so this is the kind of stitching that we're using. This is the kind of nylon where we're sourcing it from, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole different universe that I just thought was like, cool, tactical gear, chest rig, throw it on, very simple. That's all I thought, right? But oh my gosh, there's a mountain of nuance to this stuff. So it's definitely was a learning process that I'm still learning today.
Where were the forums that you're talking about? Blog places? You're talking about like 4chan or something like that?
No, not necessarily 4chan. I don't really.
Or is that a hacker?
the anonymous hacker 4chan has taken on Gun Mag Warehouse. No, it could be anywhere from browsing Reddit, browsing Instagram, asking guys who may know that you've become friends with, asking other people in the like airsoft groups or stuff like that, and they know more than you. And you essentially start taking on this knowledge. You start learning, doing your own research. Like ARFCOM's a good spot. They have like all this stuff going on in there. So it's just like places like that. I remember the Reptile House was for the Nairobi one. There are like these airsofters over in the UK. They studied all the kits, so they did a good job on that. And then
I've seen a lot of guys that follow you that are in the UK that they don't have guns, but they certainly have a lot of kit and maybe pretend guns, like airsoft guns.
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of airsoft community is pretty big in Europe, and I think there are a limited few because I've seen some guys from the UK. And I think they're running like either a 22 or something like that, like a 22 conversion kit and an AR at like a match or something. I still don't know how the UK laws work. And Finland, Finland has some pretty base gun laws for a European country.
Right.
But I can't speak to all of them, so I couldn't tell you.
How was Finland?
Dude, it was awesome, man. Yeah. It was really cool. It looked like a lot of fun. Really cool experience. First time going to Europe, and I got to go and shoot guns. Like I forgot I was in Europe when I was at the shooting match because I'm really rolling around with a CAR-15, Glock 17, live rounds on me. No one's checking me. No one's like, hey, what are you doing? Are you like? There's no authority. It's like I can do whatever I want, and it's like I'm fully kitted essentially, minus like some belt feds and stuff, but. It was awesome. And they had really cool people, man. Very kind. Very like, what's the word? Very like, it's when you're like satisfied or like you just don't like. if you don't want to talk, you can be in a car ride with them. If they don't want to talk, they're not bothered by silence. They're very content is what the word I'm looking for. But they love the sauna. These people love the sauna.
They have more saunas than they have like fast food restaurants.
Oh yeah, they love it, dude. It's a winning combo. Like I got back and I was like, tell my wife, I was like, I got to get a sauna. I have to get a sauna stat.
It's good for you.
It's great, man. I've heard. Like I felt awesome. Like I remember we went to the one spot in Helsinki where it was like a brunch spot, and then attached to it is like a sauna. So you go eat, you're drinking, and they all heavy drinkers too. You're drinking your Finnish long drink, which is fantastic. Changed my world as far as booze go. And then you're dipping into the sauna, and then you go dip in like the Baltic, I think, is the sea right there. So it's like frigid. Yeah. You feel great. You're just doing that back and forth. And it's just, of course, fantastic. So I got hooked on that. So I was like, I got to get a sauna. I got to get an ice bath. I'm going to make that my like routine in life now.
Oh, yeah.
It's like turning into the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, exactly. You also went during like the best time you possibly could have because Finland's almost always covered in ice and snow.
Yeah. It was comfy. It was comfy weather. Like you felt good in a sweater. Yeah. Like, so that it felt good there, but yeah, I was happy to not be there during like their winter war season. So,
dear God,
yeah, like they're close to the Arctic Circle. Since you flying there, I thought we were gonna fly around the Atlantic, but no, they're like just going over the top of the world, and it's like 8-hour flight, and I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, because it's a smaller circumference up there. It doesn't make much sense, but
look, not like
if you look at a map, yeah,
it was pretty sweet, man. It was definitely an adventure. Very grateful I got to do that.
Hell yeah, that's very cool. Never been to Europe, would love to go, but only in very specific areas like that because I really have no desire to travel to a foreign country that I can't carry a firearm into.
Yeah.
It sucks, but
thankfully, a lot of those countries are very safe. From what I was gathering, and I was trying to gauge because like my wife went with me too, and she like wanted to go do her own thing for a couple days, and I was like, hey, how safe is this? And they're like, oh, it is very safe, don't worry. And I was like, they're like, oh, this may be like a bad neighborhood, like from where you're from. And I'm like, okay, hold on. What do they consider a bad neighborhood? Do they consider like where I live a bad neighborhood, or are they consider like down this, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, what's your gauge? So it ended up being fine. So I would say you may have to deck the handgun to go experience the world a little bit, which may suck, but just maybe source a gun locally or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do a little European crime.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get it across. More power to you.
That's what I always thought about boats. I was like, if you take a boat there,
that's probably a better option.
Yeah, how would like do the customs show up and like, hey, we gotta search your boat real quick? I'm assuming that's what kind of happens.
I'd need a connector. I'd need somebody who knows what to do.
Yeah, there's an argument for becoming filthy rich because once you become filthy rich, it's like you show up with your own private security detail and you don't have to worry about carrying a gun.
Oh hell yeah!
You know what I mean? Like, that's a very hard goal to get to. So
yeah, that's like some elite level.
That's elite level. That's like your
World Economic Forum.
Yeah, like you're getting on a private plane, going to an island with some quirky fellow named Epstein stuff.
Yes, exactly. Going to decide what the rest of the plebs get to do in their day-to-day lives.
I just want to carry my gun for self-protection. I just want to carry my MP7 in the waistband, but apparently,
maybe mag dump, in the Coliseum. Like just basic stuff.
What is life? Could you imagine living like that? Just in the Coliseum of Rome.
Correct.
That'd be so cool, dude.
Pick up some of the dirt, smell it.
Dun.
Find where he buried those two little.
Yeah, buried his wife and his child in the Coliseum. That makes me pretty sick.
Yeah, I watched a movie that you're pretty fond of, Blood Diamond.
Yeah.
Had never seen it, and I'm like, it's a required viewing. Ultimately,
right. It's a very good movie. It was a
fantastic movie. Yeah. And of course, like when we first heard Leo talk, we're like, that sounds a little awkward. And I'm sure Leo's professional. That's exactly what it's supposed to sound like. But the accent brew was a little.
We got to joke about the accent, Avery. Yeah.
It was definitely different, but a great movie. Just wish we would have watched that before I bought her diamond ring, because that would have saved me a little bit of money.
Dude, I tried to get the conflict diamond. I like the story behind it. I'm like, did someone like lose an arm for this? And they're like, sir, we don't know. It's a conflict-free diamond. I was like, no. Where are the conflict diamonds? I know you have them in the back, so bring me the conflict diamond.
If it comes bloodied, I'll pay an extra.
I'll throw on something nice for you. Yeah.
There you go.
That's what I was trying to find, man. No, great movie. Built an entire essentially brand off of one gun from that movie. So I owed a bit of love But I don't know about that movie that got into my head, man. I just love like the history tied in with it, like the fictional history, how it played off executive outcomes, how it had the carry handle CAR-15 and all the guys who had been prior Bush War vets of South Africa, and then also from like Danny Archer being from Rhodesia, and of course it has the the apartheid history, and it's like, yeah, every nation has just bad history, and like that's once you overlook that, it's like, okay, it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, I mean, the movie didn't really focus a lot on apartheid.
Yeah,
they stuck pretty much to where the story was going to go. But that's another thing that I know that you know a lot about, not necessarily just the Rhodesia stuff,
right,
but history in general. I've heard you say that that's something you can go on real long tangents about.
It's the kind of history where it's like, I try and imagine myself in that time period where you like essentially it's like doing the Dan Carlin hardcore history method, where you take on the human element, where you're not just, because when you get taught history in high school, I remember this very vividly, you're just getting taught dates, times, and essentially the government orientation of what they want you to know about history. And it's not like the critical thinking of history. And of course, I'm just an amateur, disclaimer. I'm just an amateur, very much an amateur. But it's like taking on that different twist of, okay, what's the contextual point of history? I remember Dan Carlin, when he was doing, the Supernova in the East for his Japanese series, he like essentially went back to the samurai era to set up the story for the thinking of Imperial Japan during World War II. And it's like, okay, there's a lot that goes into history. It's not just like Japan won World War II, and it's like now we beat them. It's like we got to break down a lot, and there's just so much rabbit hole you can get into, because it really does connect at a minutia level with the human experience. There's common human experiences that we've had since the dawn of time. Like sex being a huge one, everyone wants. Dying, everyone is going to die. Women giving birth, getting a woman pregnant, eating something good, essentially getting into knife fights on a massive scale. That was a big part of the human history. Now, with more recent years, we have firearms, right? The common human experience of war. And it's just like diving into these topics and how it's like you're essentially living in kinetic part of history, but no one's ever going to talk about you because you essentially don't matter. They're going to talk about Sleepy Uncle Joe and how, right? It's like there's the key people in history, but it's just like, dude, it's just to me so fascinating. And you get to be a part of this and you get to study it too.
Well, here's another angle to that, is we have never had a digital record of time up until very recently.
That's a good point.
And the archives, we're thinking about massive data storage.
Yeah.
You very well could exist for millennia simply because your face has been on a YouTube video at some point, which was downloaded to somebody else's hard drive. The guy uploaded to it, whatever else, hundreds of years from now.
That's crazy. The digital noise you're going to have to sift through. If you think about it, too, like every minute, I think 40 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah.
So, dude, the digital footprint is going to be wild. Even, like, too, getting back to the pornographic thing, like, I remember listening to people talk about the positions or the sex stuff you could order at, like, the brothel in Pompeii, I think it was. And, like, how it's textiled onto the walls, right? It's, like, crazy stuff, like, very vulgar stuff you can order. And it's like, that's going to be like, they're going to be having dudes having podcasts 2,000 years from now being like, oh, dude, they have this website where you can go on.
Yeah.
This is before that the podcast, they're going to be like, this is before they had advanced AI sex bots.
Correct.
They had to beat their own meat, right? Yep. So
you had to order yourself a Dirty Sanchez.
You had to go and type it in. Your sex bot didn't take care of this for you. That's like essentially going to be their conversation. So that is a good point to think about, man. That's wild.
It's a pretty crazy one because, yes, obviously the heads of state and everything like that, yeah, sure, they'll be remembered. But people like Jones and stuff like that, who are unspeakable at this point, had an effect on history and the direction of the way things will go. So it's hard to know who's going to show up and who won't. And I think that's why the culture side of things, because politics is downstream of culture. Whenever you affect the culture and you affect the gun culture and how you get people to accept things and normalize them as they should be, then that leads to political changes. And sure, the head of state might be the one whose name is on the piece of paper.
That's a good point.
But ultimately,
where did that culture shift come from?
Each individual person that contributes to it actively has a role to play. And that's why I think that, you might discount it as, I'm just making YouTube videos, screwing around in the desert. There's very likely, profound moral implications later down the road that I think are net positives.
That is exciting, yet that is terrifying. It's like this thing has gone a little too far. if I'm making societal shifts, hey, I'm just a dude on the internet wearing a balaclava. Like that's gotta, ooh.
Well, we all are, right?
That's a good point.
To some degree.
Just a dude on the internet.
Yep.
Yeah. Good Lord.
And I think that's what ultimately America was built on, is the individual and not the collective. And that's why the gun community matters a lot less to me than the individual gun people that I know. Because the gun community, if you take a gross overlook at that, and then you go into the comment section, it's like, oh, gun community is really combative against each other.
Yeah.
They back and forth. There's new drama every week.
Yep. Yeah, it's just a lot of noise. I think that is also an aspect of people want to be heard, and they have an opinion that they find valid, so they want to be heard. And this is a great place where they can get some attention on that for a topic that they're very passionate about. And by all means, I encourage it. It's good for the algorithm if we're all active on each other's stuff. So, if you think that's something I say is wrong, by all means, hop in the comments and let me know. So it's definitely I can see where you're coming from. But yeah, America is founded on the idea of individual liberty. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, and I wouldn't knock anybody for leaving a comment. Most of the comments, if it's going to be a constructive comment or like, hey, you did this wrong, whatever, sure, I'm always open to that. It's usually the ones that they're just trying to take a shot to see if they get a response, right? It's kind of the counter culture to like basically anything. It's the troll type culture, right? Those people are always going to be there. And no matter what, they always have been there. It's just the level of publicity that you can get now is completely different. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I don't think we're worse now than we were in the past. I just think it's more obvious.
Yeah.
And it's also harder to tell who's an actual psychopath from a regular comment. Sometimes it's really obvious. But other times, they'll leave a regular comment, and if you make a little snidey one back to them, you don't know who you're actually talking to here. And the amount of time and effort, because people are a little crazy. Yeah. The amount of time and effort somebody will go through to get you back for that, a little sketch as far as I'm concerned. But like I said, I think it is an integral part of the human journey and story that we are in the cusp of something big. And it might be the fall before the good times come back.
Right. We're in the hard times now, my brother in Christ.
Oh, I think we're about to be there. I think that the weak men have created the situation that we're in now. And it's really easy to blame that on somebody else, right? Yeah. But ultimately, we are the culture. Ultimately, we do make up this country. And the fewer people that stand up and say something about it, the longer this is going to be the way it is. The longer we're going to continue having our rights taken away and slowly chipped away.
It's a very interesting time to be alive when the proletariat, essentially the masses, has now access to mass communication. Anyone can be the mass communication or the mass media. Yep. You have guys like Joe Rogan, whose platform is way bigger than the conventional media now. Sure. That's a huge threat to the establishment.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's like, who's the establishment? It's just, to people that want to control the narrative, that's a big threat.
Correct.
Dude was getting throttled during COVID when he was just asking simple questions.
Or having doctors on.
That also went against the narrative. And now that narrative has shifted to be like, you didn't really need the jab. And it's like, okay, so it's just another checkbox for the crazies. So
doesn't actually prevent anyone from getting the disease. That was the biggest part for me. It's like oh, cool. That's what a vaccine actually is. It stops it. That's why polio was cured, right? Yeah. That's how it worked.
Thanks, polio. Yeah.
Doesn't really happen with this. We have to change definitions around, and certain things get memory hold, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, now it makes more sense. You don't have to type the person or group them into it's an ideology more so than anything else, and it's about human control.
Yes.
And deciding where we're going to go.
Yes, and I think it's a very... I think the people at the top that want to control the masses probably figured it out by now, or they've definitely got a decent leash on it. But it is going to be interesting to see how we all have instant communication now. We can pretty much communicate. I talk to people now from Europe almost daily that I met in Finland, right? and I can instantaneously talk to them. You could FaceTime them if you wanted to. Like, it's freaking nuts. But they have to, like, how do you control that, right? It's like, you never had that in history before. It would be like, hey man, I'm going to Finland. I might die. I'm gonna hop on a boat. See you in like 5 years. Like, this is brand new, man. This is brand new with the advent of technology, because the world has got a lot smaller. So it's just like, how do you control that if you're someone in power? And of course, the dissemination of information is definitely a great way. And how is that going to affect with like people that just don't care? It's nonstop, constant information coming at you.
That
just
and
doesn't matter.
Disinformation, like actual information designed to be wrong, rather than just trying to hide. It's just bury it in more hay.
How many times you see a video where you're like, oh, that's obviously fake, but like your uncle thinks it's real? You know what I mean? I've even like done like prank videos where I was arresting my buddy for posting stuff on, like, it was like for a video, right? And someone thought it was real, and they reposted it thinking like, this is coming to America. And it's like, oh no, this is fake. This is fake. Like, they're stuck along the house, but we're in Australia, right? Like, it's fake. So it's definitely, man, the internet's a weird place. It's a very weird place, and it's very fun to be living in this time, I will say.
Yeah, well, there is a book by Gustave Le Bon. Okay, it was written in either the late 1900s or 1800s or the early 1900s. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it's called The Psychology of the Crowd. And essentially, what he talked about is back in the day, people ruled with the divine right of kings. Right, my word goes, and then I got my nobles and everybody else underneath me, just like the Alexander the Great situation. The institution is already set up, but eventually we started moving towards whoever controls the crowd is the one in charge. Because if you get the masses on your side, then all of a sudden, even if you're selling them poison, if they're begging you for it, you're in charge. And one of the quotes he says in there is, whoever gives them their illusions is their master, and whoever tries to show them that they believe in illusions will always be their enemy. So, in the same sense, the Joe Rogan aspect of regular average guy talking to the experts, and I mean, he's not a regular average guy at this point. Highly successful and highly motivated and determined to be a good dude in a lot of ways. But he has that sphere of influence, and he can steer the masses, and I think that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that their breakaway civilization and their ultimate goal of siphoning all the good stuff for them, and because I honestly think there's probably a really easy solution for energy crisis, but that technology can't really get out because there's a lot of vested interests that are making a lot of money on what we're doing now with the status quo. And the same thing with communications with mass media. So we end up in this kind of battle between the regular average guy who has no qualifications and the experts that have always told you right from wrong, right? And we know that the media doesn't represent things to a factual basis. Like,
you just follow the money.
We've known that for a long time.
You just follow the money.
But yet, as soon as you start following the money, you're like, oh, that's why they're starting to do this. So it's less about the group of people, but if you critically think about why would you do that if you were in that position, then it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes plenty of sense then. So, anyways,
I will say, before we go any further, I've always loved this thought. Being a prior cop, like arresting criminals will get together and they will conspire to like rob a bank, right? And these are typically poor people at their ends. You know, maybe they're just trying to like make some extra money, right? On the inverse, I guarantee rich people are getting together and plotting, okay, how can we steer things? How can we make things work out in our favor? Literally, the owner of Executive Outcomes, Simon Mann, was arrested for trying to get a coup going in, I think it was the Guinea country, or Papua New Guinea, I believe. And that coup was essentially funded by Margaret Thatcher's son, right? And it's like stuff like that, that's happening all the time, all over the world. Crazy stuff, powerful people in play. There's a basketball game and there's no rules and $1 billion on the line. Then the other team's getting murdered, like off the get.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's no rules, man. So, but yes, sorry, that's always my like.
So that the idea is that there's not this grand conspiracy,
right? No, it's like there's a plan.
Pretty much, definitely happening.
You sound kind of dumb if you think there's not people playing a game with what's going on in the world.
I mean, we already have laws against that. Like, with specific trade unions and stuff like that, where people organize and decide, hey, this is how much we're going to charge for stuff. Like, you can't price fix.
You're telling me I'm a conspiracy theorist if you think that I think people work together to get around a system? It's like, okay, get out of here, nerd.
Well, if anybody does, you know who's a part of that group.
Who?
If anybody tells you you're a conspiracy theorist for thinking that,
right,
you know who's a part of that group. They just outplayed, got outplayed.
Just got outplayed.
Pretty much that simple. So, play less video games.
Yeah. Lift weights.
Go to the gym. Yeah. Drink water. Get the all chemicals out of there. Mm-hmm. Filter all that out. Mm-hmm. Get your pineal gland opened up.
Yeah, that's a big word.
Pineal gland?
I don't even know what that is, dude.
It's the seat of the soul.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
It's the very center of your brain. If you cut your brain right in half, it's literally the symbol, I think it's Osiris or something like that, the Egyptians.
Yeah. Okay, this tracks.
It's where they thought the seat of your soul was.
Yeah.
And if you drink a bunch of water with fluoride, it gets calcified.
No kidding.
Then your self-actualization, your chakras and other shit I don't know about gets out of whack.
It's a little goofy.
And then you become easy to manipulate.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Microplastics.
Yeah, you're a sheep. You're being the sheep. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. You must lift weights and drink water to counter this.
Yeah, or become sheepdog. And dominate the sheep.
We gotta dominate the sheep, brother.
That's right. Dude. Anyways, well, that's all I really have. Those are some of the things I want to talk about. The gear was a big one for sure.
Yep.
Because that is I feel like any direction you go, whether it's gear or guns, if you follow it long enough, you'll realize that it is the rabbit hole. It's the Alice in Wonderland. It never stops. It just continues to go deeper.
It goes deeper, man. It goes deeper. That's pretty much it, man.
So you just got to follow your passion wherever it lies and enjoy the ride, so to speak, and maybe go out there and make some content for yourself.
Yeah, pretty spot on. Well, man, should we go shoot this bad boy?
Let's do it.
I'm Jones, and all right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
It's a good time.